chance to pause taking the numbers, and let me show you where the concern is. We asked, how much do you agree or disagree with the statement that you've got concerns about how MSPs manage security? And it's kind of a mixed bag. If you add up strongly agree and strongly disagree, so strongly agree and agree on the one hand, and strongly disagree and disagree on the other side, you see that 37% have some degree of concern around security, and the other don't. Like, it's a pretty equal match, and then the remaining 24% are fairly neutral about it. So what you see here is security is really important. Employee experience is really important. Not 100% sure how the MSPs are going to manage that balance, but I know they can probably protect my security better than I can, and I trust them to be up to speed. When we dug into the reasons of the people that weren't going with MSPs, the main reason that the SME IT professional will choose not to work with an SME just comes down to a sense of control. They said, I prefer to handle IT myself. It's because there's so much uncertainty, or because they feel that things are so weird and fast moving in their organization. The minority of people that hang on to control and don't work with an MSP, that group wants control. And about 56% said, look, number one reason I don't work with an MSP is because I want that sense of control. So having a sense of ownership and agency and being able to secure the organization and help people work more efficiently, it comes down to, do you think you can do that? Is it easy enough for you to do that? You're going to rely on somebody else to do that? That seems to be the big question. And I see this level of the question: what kind of differences in security are you seeing in a startup versus a larger or more established company? What I can tell you is, for the, and Ben, I'll turn to you here in a second and see if you got a point of view, but for the startup, the question of security management is one of the biggest issues. When I was at Gartner, I actually covered cybersecurity and collaborative computing, and it's been true for a long time that even though the larger organizations have more to manage, they have bigger structures around security management, security governance, whereas for the smaller organizations, you've got less process in place a lot of the time, you've got less governance in place a lot of the time, and it's just a less organized affair around security. It tends to be a little bit more reactive, which is another reason you might want just someone else to handle it, because they provide that structure. Ben, is there any other thing that you want to comment on the differences in security concerns between the smaller versus some of the larger companies?
I think the biggest thing as it comes to startup versus larger companies is that, you know, you have your lines of demarcation, right? And those are going to be blurred in a startup. My hat can be multiple things. And
Yeah.
when you have one person wearing multiple hats, that can start to open up some opportunities for risk that might not be there in a larger organization that has the cost and the overhead to be able to pay for a security and a risk compliance person, or, you know, a DevOps people or whatever to lock down certain areas. And so going to, like, say, an MSP for those startup organizations, they get kind of like that out of box, you know, all the things that those larger companies need to be able to address those things. So that's what I hear primarily when people go to MSPs, is because they want to
Yeah.
cover multiple things.
Well, and actually that delineation, Ben, is borne out in the final question we asked around MSPs was, okay, so what is the size of SME that uses it? And here you see that we saw pretty equal representation across every variant size of SME that we asked about. I mean, they're the smallest SME engagement was with the smallest organization, but once you hit that 50 to 100 mark, you see the numbers double and jump up. And it just shows you that when my challenge is managing a bunch of employees that I can't necessarily see every day, where I've got a little bit less control, then having outside help becomes even more important. Ben, was there anything about these numbers that surprised you?
I mean, it just, what I just said, right? This almost kind of contradicts that just a little bit, right? Because I'm surprised, but that sweet spot of being, you know, that 200 to 500, but then you also see almost 19% the people who responded believe that if you're over 1,000, that's when an MSP makes sense, right? So I think the thought of, hey, you know, the more employees that you get, right, does it make sense to start to supplement elements of your IT organization with an MSP, or should you go to that old model of, hey, the
Yeah.
fewer numbers of employees are better? So it's overall that, you're right. Once you hit that 50, that employee mark 50, that just seems to be a good little cornerstone that makes the most sense to bring in some help from an MSP. Otherwise, you're trying to ramp up an entire IT department from a ground zero. So
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. The last thing that comes to mind, just based on the previous question of what's the difference in how you approach security, startup versus a more established company, the motivation. If I'm a startup, I've got to protect growth. I've got to protect growth because I've promised some very wealthy people that they're going to get their money back and that we're going to grow and give a good return. Or if I'm a family-owned business, I want to grow and protect my legacy, but it's the growth I'm protecting. And so I want to secure anything that might inhibit my growth. If I'm a larger, more established company, one of the main motivators is I don't want to lose something. I've got more to lose. I'm protecting data. I'm protecting assets. But in either case, I've got a good reason to engage in security. And as you're saying, Ben, with a larger organization, I've got more safeguards in place. I've got cybersecurity specialists. I have a team, a process, governance, as opposed to the people that are wearing multiple hats and just getting everything done at the same time. But the bottom line is that people are using MSPs because it's a headache to balance both security and the employee experience. The more employees you have, the bigger that headache is. And the bigger that headache is, the more likely you are to want some help. I'll pause for any more questions. We've got plenty of time for discussion. If not, we're getting now into the meat of what is it about the employee experience we're trying to protect, and where is that among the priorities for SME ITs right now? Taking over the
So
chat.
not really a question there, Josh, but just something from the audience, and just more of a comment to add to that a little bit. With this comes from one of our audience members that with MSPs being available globally in regions where dev cost is lower, a lot more SMEs have access and ability to use MSPs
Yeah,
as long as there is a trusted track record of the MSP wherever it may be globally. So cost benefits with managed risks with a dedicated MSP can help with any size SME from anywhere. So that's a really good point. Thank you for that.
that's cool. And that's also the beauty of the change we've all been through. I mean, it's been rough the last 2 years, but we've really learned that location is no longer a barrier. You can get MSPs from support anywhere in the world, and that's awesome.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.